had an opportunity to meet some of our secondary candidates, and now you have an opportunity to meet some of our elementary candidates. All of the candidates are in a post-degree program, 16-month. All of them are embedded in schools in the first term of their programs, and all of them will be walking into their first practicum experience in a month. Are we there? A month and a half, 6 weeks. So I just wanted to introduce, we have 3 teacher candidates with us today, Grayson, Hillary, and Isabel. We're going to share a little bit about the inquiry that they went through during their fall term, and they're going to share what their inquiries were. So just as a start out, I just want to give you a brief overview of what we're talking about when we say inquiry, because everybody has a different definition. So basic definition for inquiry and how we talk about it with teacher candidates, it's a wondering. You have a wondering about something, you frame up a question to that, and you go explore. There's no expectation that you're going to come out with 1 answer or 8 answers or any answer. The goal is to, what are you wondering about in education in your teaching practice? And how do you start a question around that and explore it? There become tensions around when we start putting categories around things, which happens in the research. Trying to categorize, is it guided inquiry, open inquiry, free inquiry, and what does it look like in classrooms? It's different when I'm doing it as a teacher versus when I'm doing it with my group of students, and so those can look different. These candidates all participated in what we classify as a teacher inquiry. And then also the mindset. What does that look like? How do we get past, yeah, but these are the challenges? How do we open minds and walk into classrooms of what could this look like? So that world of inquiry and really taking on some different lenses, weaving in new BC curriculum, which is language all around personalized learning and inquiry, and allowing students to explore some of those wonderings that they have, and what it looks like between students and teachers, and how that can look different in different scenarios. So we are interested in what does it look like when we immerse teacher candidates in this experience at the very beginning of their development. For most of them, they've all come to us with at least an undergrad degree, but some come with masters, some come with multiple degrees. They're very successful students. They're really good at being told, this is what you need to learn. I'm going to give you a test at the end, as we heard. I'm going to give you a test at the end. Being asked, what do you wonder about? Go, do it, can be really uncomfortable. And so they're going to share with you what that was like. And I think we're going to hear from Grayson first. Okay. You come over here now.
Okay. So my inquiry was, how do we integrate residential school history into our teaching? And this is a picture of Bompus Hall / Le Point Hall, which is the residential school that was in my community. It was recently tore down. And I went to elementary school there. So after it was a residential school, they turned it into a library, an elementary school upstairs. And so this was a huge part of our community for a very long time. And so learning about just how to teach residential school history has given me the strength and courage to share my story as an intergenerational survivor. And I want to share that story because I want to help students learn and grow towards a more compassionate society. So the previous work that I've done and the work that I continue to do is much bigger than just bringing culture and language into our classrooms. It's about creating safer environments for our students so they can learn and grow in a different type of education setting, and to explore a different approach to education. And we do it because students deserve to feel safe, but especially with Indigenous students. It's very vital to put that extra effort in with the Indigenous students because of the very vivid residential school legacy that many students, including myself, live with today. And the need for building that trust is, and I believe that all collective efforts from all people are necessary to revitalize the relationships between Aboriginal peoples and Canadian society. And I believe that our elementary schools are at the forefront of reconciliation, and that as teachers and educators, I believe that through our students is how we can create change towards reconciliation and a better future. So that was my inquiry, and that's why I chose it. It was very frustrating trying to just kind of give you the blank space here to research or learn something and to tell us about it later, which was it wasn't very easy to do. But I mean, it all kind of came back to like, it was a passion. It was something I didn't know that I would take this pain that I've lived with as an intergenerational survivor and bring it forth with me as an educator. I just didn't expect that at all, but I mean, here I am, and here it is. Yeah, thank you. Leslie.
So my inquiry was, how can I facilitate social emotional learning in children? This is my board. These are some resources that I found. And this is the end result, so it's messier than this to begin with. My question didn't start out that way. My question started with Laura and Michelle saying, find a wondering, find something you're interested in, find something that you can form into a question and see if you can explore it. And my background is in psychology, and I've always had an interest and passion in people and thoughts and feelings and behaviors. And so stepping into a classroom full of students in linked practice, I was able to witness behaviors of children. And one significant moment that stuck out for me was a moment when the whole class was working on a project. It was kind of a finish up this part of the project, you have 30 minutes, see what you can get done, I'm giving you this time. And two students were worried about it. They didn't know how to finish, they didn't know where to start, and you could see that worry and stress within them. But the difference in how they expressed that stress or worry was so completely different. One ran to her teacher, looked for affirmation. What do I do? Am I doing it right? Is this okay? The other student just completely shut down. He didn't want help, didn't want to talk about it. And I, as an observer, thought, how, as a teacher, do you witness your students expressing emotions so differently and meet their needs when the feeling they're experiencing is the same or similar? And that's where I went with it. That was my wondering. And the question that I came to was involving social emotional learning after much discussion with other teachers. However, I didn't know what social emotional learning was. I started with, this is my wondering, and I was introduced to this topic. And it was a research project to begin with, for me. It was a wondering, and I heard about social emotional learning, started researching it. Okay, they gave me this idea or this topic, what is it? Why is it important? How do I facilitate it? And it was, for me, what I was doing was research. I was trying to learn what it was. But throughout my inquiry journey, something changed. As I learned more about social emotional learning, as I learned about the subtopics, all the multiple facets of it, as I heard the overlap within my classes about nonviolent communication, self-regulated learning, I realized that I was so passionate about it. I was so passionate about social emotional learning, how to facilitate it, what I can do in my classes, all these beautiful colors, these wonderful books that are so heartwarming and can bring so much to the classroom. These little activities, how compassionate is your heart, or the color of your heart, where kids can just go up and say, I saw orange today. Which is so, these little things that you can add to your classroom were so, such a big part of my identity and my teacher identity and what I would want to bring to my classroom. However, I realized that none of these aspects of social emotional learning can start until you have a relationship with your students. And through linked practice, I learned how insignificant relationships are. So nonviolent communication, or teaching nonviolent communication, is how to be self-regulated learning. You can't do that until you know the learner. So that felt like my inquiry came full circle. I started with the wondering, I moved to social emotional learning, and then I realized that none of it can happen. None of it can happen until I build a relationship with my students. I left with bigger questions as well. And I don't have the answer to them. To read a few to you. So one of my questions was, how do adults address their own emotional learning? Or own emotional learning and emotional literacy? Do we as adults take social emotional learning into account in our own lives as much as we should? What aspects of what are the social expectations around emotional expression? and does it affect how we teach it? And last but not least, is more emotional expression expected from children than adults? Why or why not? I don't have these answers, but there's something that I feel passionate about and I'm excited to explore them.
Alright, so for my story of inquiry, it was kind of based around my personal interests, and the topic that I decided to go with was outdoor instruction time. So these interests to me, they're both personal, but then also stem from my education as well. So my degree was in sport and fitness leadership, and then as a kid growing up, I always enjoyed playing sports and being active and being outdoors. So this was just kind of a natural choice for me, this topic. And thinking back to being a younger student and being in the classroom, I remember loving the times when we got to get up and move around and go outside, and those are the most vivid memories. And then when I think about when we were sitting in class all day, I definitely don't have the same feelings about those times. So that's one of the reasons why I decided to go with this topic. And then just in general, I wanted to see what was happening in schools about outdoor instruction time and kind of what it looked like and just learn more about it. And so the process for me through inquiry was, I started with a very specific question, and it was, okay, if we teach writing outdoors, how does that affect a child's ability to write descriptively? So from that question, I started off looking at some literature, finding out more information, what was out there. I spoke with some teachers. Luckily we were in schools with linked to practice, so I spoke with my mentor teachers and other teachers at the school just to find out what they do. And then I also talked to some students as well, just to see what they like, what their likes and dislikes were. After talking with teachers and looking at the literature, I realized that my topic was too specific. There wasn't a ton of information out there on taking writing outdoors, and not many teachers in the schools took their writing from their classroom outside. So I decided to change my question a little bit and adjust it slightly, and I basically just made it about outdoor instruction time. And I went back to teachers and I said, okay, what do you do in your class to include outdoor instruction time? How does it look when you do that? And asking the students, okay, do you like it when you get to go outside to learn? How do you feel when you come back inside after being outside? And those types of things. And it was basically just to get more information that was applicable for my future practice. So some concrete ideas and resources for how to include outdoor instruction time into the classroom. So that was after I did the initial research, restructured my question, and then talked to a few more people. That was kind of the end of the inquiry process for me, because that was the end of the semester and that was when we were leading up to our gallery walk. But I definitely wasn't done with the topic. Like I have, just like Isabel said, I have a ton more questions that I want to touch on, but I think those types of questions, they won't be left behind. I think those are things that I will likely address during my practicum and in the future as a teacher. So some main takeaways for me, just about inquiry-based learning in general. I think it was a great opportunity.
Is this the slide?
No, you can go back. Just about inquiry-based learning in general is, as a student or as a younger student, I didn't get to experience it, so I didn't know what it was like and I didn't know what it felt like. But then experiencing it last semester, I started to understand how beneficial it was and how I was able to find out more about myself and more about myself as a teacher, because I got to dive deeper into what I was actually interested in. And I think that's something that's really important to provide for our students. And then like with inquiry, it also allows you to see more of the individual side of each of your students, and just get to know them more, and then you're able to create a better classroom environment for that. So yeah, basically these pictures, this was my final poster board for the gallery walk where we presented our information on our inquiry. And then this was just a sample of something that was in my classroom on Wednesdays that the teacher, just a simple activity, taking something from the outdoors, inspiration from the outdoors to create an art project.
Alright, so for all of us, as you heard, within the processes there was challenges. For most of us, the process was the challenge. Inquiry was so new to us that it was hard to wrap our minds around, I'm speaking for all of us here, but it was hard to wrap our minds around the fact that this was something we were doing for us. We weren't doing it for a teacher. We weren't doing it for a professor who said, take this topic, research it, hand in a paper later. That wasn't the point, but for me, I had a really hard time getting past that barrier. I like I said before, I started off as a research project. I was doing all this research and way too many tabs open on my computer, and all of a sudden I realized that I needed to understand what my inquiry meant to me, what it was going to mean to me, and where it was going to take me from there. Like I said, the beginning seemed so daunting. We all felt a little lost. But all three of us, unknowingly, chose topics that were near and dear to us. Like I said, I have a background in psychology, and understanding people is something that I'm passionate about. Grayson has her background, and it's her home, so that's something she's so passionate about. And for Hillary, it was also her background. Outdoor education is something that she's going to take through her teaching career, and is going to be part of her teaching identity. However, once we started exploring these familiar topics, we realized that there were way bigger questions that we still wanted to answer. So although it started familiar, it left us with unfamiliar. It left us with big questions that we're going to keep exploring. Like I said before, it really did turn into a passion project. It wasn't a research project anymore. I felt so much autonomy over my topic and so much passion and excitement to describe it and explain it and talk to other people about it. That's where I left off with that.
And just some common themes that we kind of found throughout, like when the three of us were discussing each of our stories with inquiry, and then also talking to colleagues and their experiences with inquiry. First, just how it comes from a place of wondering and curiosity, and how that is specific to the individual. So just like Isabel mentioned, we all picked something that we were interested in, and it doesn't matter which topic you pick. If you're interested in it, then that's great. Go dive into it and learn more about it. And when thinking about how it's inspiring continued learning for us, the inquiry that we did, it doesn't end once we did that final gallery walk. We'll carry the things that we learned, we'll carry on the things that we learned in that moment to our practicum and to our future teaching, and even to our coursework this semester, because we've spent so much time and we've invested so much into that we want to carry it forward. And then, like we've said about the questions that kind of arise throughout inquiry and how they're bigger and bigger, it was definitely a common theme not only among the three of us, but also with the rest of our colleagues, and how even though when we completed our inquiry, there were still so many more questions that were linked to it and that we wanted to go deeper into. And finally, the final finding that we just kind of noticed was that through the inquiry and our final gallery walk, we were able to share what we spent so much time on with our colleagues. We were able to walk around and talk to them, and you'd go up and say, oh, tell me about your inquiry, and then whoever, if it was Isabel, she would just talk because she's so passionate about it. She'd be talking to her, like, okay, I need to go talk to somebody else. But it was just great because you got to know more about those individuals and people maybe that shared a similar interest. Like there was a number of people that were interested in nature-based learning and different things. So I would go up and learn more from them and hear a different side of things and make that connection. And I think in the end that just basically created a stronger sense of community with the fellow teacher candidates. Like there was a whole mix of secondary teacher candidates and elementary, and we were all in different places, but we were able to share that space and just feel that connection.
So here's a picture from our final gallery walk. So all of our candidates, there were about 150 of them. We opened up the McLaurin lobby hallway, if you're familiar with our building, and the students set up one group presented, one group visited, and then we switched it around. We gave guiding questions in case we felt that people were a bit anxious about how to approach someone they might not know and ask questions. Some people really used them. Other people just came up and said, tell me about your inquiry. And so it was a great opportunity for faculty, staff, instructors, and teacher candidates and people from the field to come and see the celebration and the conversation that happened at this event. And although it was a culminating event for us in terms of the term, it clearly wasn't a culminating event in terms of their own inquiry and what they're passionate about. So this was, but it was a great opportunity to start to see all of the threads that connect, even though the topics might have seemed different. It was a fascinating experience. So, okay. And that's, if you have questions about what you've heard or seen today, we welcome your emails and comments. So I don't know if you have questions for us at this point.
So I guess it's a question for all of you, so I'll see who wants to jump in. But I started reading between the lines when you talked about sort of beginning feeling lost, and I'm reading between the lines that that's also probably frustrated and some challenging moments in the classroom as you're trying to get from lost to this feeling of ownership. And so I'm curious about what it was that supported you to get from there to there.
Sorry, go ahead.
I think initially from within ourselves, choosing topics that were familiar to us was something that helped guide us towards that ownership, just because we were unfamiliar with the process, so we chose something that was familiar to us. And it was really helpful, because I think a lot of times you might want to do something that's outside your comfort zone when you're researching something, but with this it's okay, it's okay to do something that I know a lot about, because I don't know a lot about it in this setting. And then also our seminar leaders on our Wednesday visits were very helpful in just discussing. You'd say, okay, I'm interested in this, but I don't know what to do with the question. I don't know where to go with it. And they would kind of workshop you through it and be like, okay, let's think about this. How would this work? And they were really helpful in the process, and just kind of helping you break it down and opening your eyes to maybe a different side of it that you hadn't thought about it before.
Also, during the term, we had projects that we had to do building up to the final gallery walk, and unknowingly or knowingly, they led us to further understand our inquiry question. So the first assignment that we had to do that was part of the inquiry project was interviews. We had to do at least 3 interviews with other teachers or professors or anyone that could kind of connect to our question and give us a little bit more information. So I interviewed my mentor teacher during linked practice, a kindergarten teacher who actually had ECE working in our classroom, and I also interviewed one of my professors who was teaching learners in learning environments. So that brought light to my understanding of what this new topic was. And we also had to do a reflection. And one of the reflections that we had to do, or the reflection we had to do, was on one of the UVic teacher competencies. And the teacher competency I chose just so happened to link perfectly into my inquiry. And it wasn't until one of my seminar leaders said, "This is great, this is exactly the same." And I was like, oh wow. So those processes by the end were like, okay, this makes sense.
It wasn't until we started doing the other assignments, like the interviews and things like that, that kind of solidified what the inquiry, or like what it is that I was choosing. I knew it wanted, because I did the Indigenous Language Revitalization program, I knew that it was going to be cultural or Indigenous content, and then it kind of just came to be that, like, I have this whole life experience of intergenerational survivor and trauma and the residential school history, and I come from an entire family that has, that history as well, so it kind of just came to be. And then, it turned out I had a lot to say. It's crazy.
Well, it sounds like coaching played a significant role in taking it from there.
Yeah, oh, for sure. Our seminar leaders, they were really great in regards to, and when they give you a blank topic and tell you to research this, you can go off track, as a lot of us did. And then it was great that we had them to turn to, and then they kind of would just redirect us and be like, well, what about this? Or it's the same thing, but maybe worded a little bit different. But yeah, it was really great.
So thank you so much for your presentation. At U of C, I wish that we had a chance to come back and actually take an inquiry question and go into practicum and then come back and say this is what I found and having all that stuff. That was really cool. But I just was wondering if you could all share, just for the pre-service teachers here, one kind of practical example of how you saw your inquiry question implemented in class. So was there one way that you, throughout your education, this is what they did every day, or this is an easy way to get out their education, or by each of you, because these are all like very relevant topics of what we're learning.
Yeah, that was kind of one of my wishes that I'd done, is I actually didn't get to be in a classroom when they were implementing it. I got to see, because the classroom I was in, the teacher understood the benefit of it and she wished that she would do it more, but she didn't actually do it a ton. But some of the examples that teachers would give me of what they would do, I talked to one grade 1 teacher, and she's an outdoor ed advocate, and she loves taking her class outside. And it can be as simple as going outside on a nature walk and acknowledging like the 5 senses that that they are seeing or hearing or whatever on the walk, and then coming back into the class and talking about it or writing about it or drawing about it, and then linking different subjects, so some cross-curricular learning. So if you're doing a science lesson on the salmon spawning or the salmon life cycle, then they would walk down to the creek that was close to the school, look at it, and then come back to the class and do that learning, so that the kids are like, oh, we just saw that, and they have that connection, which makes it a stronger experience. Yeah, so that was, unfortunately I didn't get to see it firsthand, but I got some pretty good examples. Yeah.
For me, some of those books that I posted up on the slide there were actually books that were lended to me by the kindergarten teacher that I interviewed. So one of them was called Social Thinkers, and is actually really amazing. It's a storybook, but it addresses so much of the social emotional learning competencies, as well as the grade 5 class that I was in. When I interviewed him, my mentor teacher, he got me to tell him what social emotional learning was to me. And it wasn't easy, because I was still learning so much about it. But because there's so many facets and subtopics of it, you really have to look at it and find out what it is that you want to take from that and bring into your classroom. Another thing that the kindergarten teacher that I interviewed said to me, which really resonated, was that it's not a subject you teach. It's not this is on the schedule today. It's every day. It's every moment that you're teaching these things and these skills to kids.
Cool.
For mine, there wasn't any of that content or anything in that classroom or the school. I mean, there was Indigenous artwork on the walls, but that was it. There wasn't, and there weren't Indigenous students either. It was just below the area, I guess. So because I wasn't able to get that on my Wednesday visits, it was something that I brought and that I was able to share with my mentor teacher, and that he learned. And I'm actually going back to the class, and I'm going to do the Carol's blanket exercise with the class, with the grade 4 class, to teach them from a different perspective about residential school history, the legacy, the impacts, and things like that. And it was right after Orange Shirt Day, so I mean there was a lot of reading and stuff like that going on within the classrooms. But yeah, so I wasn't there, but it was something that I was able to bring. And my mentor teacher was more than welcoming of it, and he offered me if there was things that I wanted to share, if I wanted to teach it with them, but that it was totally fine, and he opened that opportunity for me, and so.
Cool.
I know coming from like U of C as well, and even just like the Alberta design of the Indigenous cities and stuff. Like, what do you think is the most impactful thing that we could teach kind of in that? Like, there's so much that we also need to be aware of, but what do you think is the most important thing?
To actually do it, even if you don't know how, even if you're terrified. That's one thing. A lot of our teachers aren't doing it because they don't know how. They don't want to insult or screw up protocol.
Yeah.
But I mean, so they don't do it, and so
Right.
everybody loses out on it. So as uncomfortable as you are, do it. Become a member of the community. You will learn from the community members. Reach out.
Yeah.
Do it. The best thing you can do is to do it.
Cricket, know, understand, and can do.